Hello and welcome to the Hibs Observer post-match debrief here at Easter Road after Hibs won St Johnstone 2. A really, really bad day at the office for Nick Montgomery and his players. A reprieve elsewhere means that they're not quite out of the top six race as it stands, but you'd have to say, even with Dundee slipping up today, Hibs still kind of outsiders to get into that top six. So it's things aren't looking great heading into the the final pre-split fixture against Motherwell next week. We'll get to that in due course. Joined today, as always, by Patrick McPartland to take a look back over the 90 minutes. Before we kick off, though, just a wee word for our sponsors. As I've said, we're thrilled to have Weissman, a global leader in the boiler industry, known for their top-notch German engineering, sponsor our podcast. They've teamed up with Scotland's own award-winning team, MPH Boilers, making this a perfect match right here in Scotland. Weissman's boilers are engineered to deliver not just warmth, but unparalleled efficiency and reliability. It's cutting-edge technology designed to save you on energy bills and reduce emissions. So you're getting service from the best in the business. As part of the partnership, when you choose a Weissman boiler installed by MPH Boilers, you also get a free internet controller so you can manage your heating anytime, anywhere. You can also get the first year's service free, and that gives you, that bit of peace of mind and just make sure that you are looked after. So this is your chance to get world-class engineering with local expert service. Weissman and MPH Boilers, it's a match made in Scotland. Make sure to check them out and take a first step towards a warmer, more efficient home. Back to the action. Unfortunately, Hibs fans, you might be thinking, poor day at the office all round for Hibs, Patrick, on the pitch, and then obviously made that bit worse by what transpired elsewhere.
Yeah, I think, Nick Montgomery was, quite rightly saying before the game that all that he was focused on, all the players were focused on was getting 2 wins out of 2 in the final 2 pre-split games. Obviously, that would have been, the ideal situation for themselves, 3 points today, and then they can go into next week with a certain degree of comfort, I suppose. And, it seems a little bit, obviously they're kind of relying on other results going their way, and all they can do is go to Fir Park and try and get 3 points, which I don't think is the easiest of tasks. Motherwell showing today what they're capable of doing.
Yeah, the momentum behind them now as well.
Exactly, and I think not the worst thing. There's lots of bad things about today's performance for Hibs, but I think one of the worst things about this Hibs team is that you can't rely on them to go to a place like that in such a big game and think, they'll put up a fight, because they should have put up a fight today, and you would have thought, this is a really good chance for them to, do their top six chances, a world of good, and they just didn't take it. And that happens far too often with this Hibs team, and that really is one of the biggest criticisms. And I don't know whether it's a mentality issue. I don't know whether it's, to do with the quality of the players or what it is, but today was a day, and the wind didn't help, the weather didn't help. It was swirling around Easter Road all match. But it's the same for both teams, and what this should have been was a day for Hibs to really, if not set down a marker for the sort of final few games of the season, at least show what they're about, show that they're serious about getting into the top six and then taking it from there. But what we got was, a really meek performance, a kind of forgettable first half with not really an awful lot to talk about, bar, a kind of half-hearted penalty shout for the challenge on Marcondes. And then Hibs didn't really get going until they conceded. And then after they equalised, and it was a very good equaliser, very well worked, you would expect them to sort of take a bit of heart from that to go on and sort of get a winner. And, perhaps if they had, I don't know, if they'd had if they'd had the defence they wanted to, obviously Will Fish going off at the break with with illness, maybe that's had an impact. But even despite that, you would be looking at that Hibs team and thinking it's got enough in it to go on and get the winner, maybe get another goal, help the goal difference. In the end, what's happened is they've lost again to a St Johnstone side that's now taken 6 points off them this season. Which is really, I think, for a team with Hibs aspirations and ambitions, is just not good enough.
No, it wasn't. I think what could possibly most alarming for Nick Montgomery is, you touched on there how this was, kind of quite rightly billed as a game that had to be won. to then come out and play with, I felt such a lack of intensity in those circumstances was pretty damning. Just in terms of that first half and the way, I think we will be back on Monday with a kind of fuller, more comprehensive breakdown of the game itself. But I think just in general terms, it's just how slow it was in the first half.
Slow, laboured.
Like, I kind of, St Johnstone's setup was as such, that Hibs were going to have to be patient in trying to get around that or through it or over it, whatever way you try and break it down. But I think if you're going to take the approach where if you're shifting the ball from side to side, you need to do it with more urgency. The ball needs to move faster. St Johnstone were kind of happy to let Hibs centre halves have the ball. They would put pressure on if the ball went out wide, and that's when you need to then kind of recycle it back and out the other side and just try and create gaps. And it just, as I said, the main point was just the sort of lack of intensity, and there was obviously a bit more urgency comes in the second half, but then it's kind of that urgency is sparked by the sense of desperation that comes with going behind against, obviously, well against the run of play. But I think when you turn in a performance like Hibs had done in the first half and then at the start of that second half, you're always liable for that to come and bite you, even if you don't think. And so Johnstone hadn't really threatened at all up until that point, but all it really took was one moment. Sidibe, he's got the pace. It was a bit of a real mess from a Hibs point of view. Kind of one ball in behind and he runs through and finishes. Good finish, to be fair. Really good finish, and he was a threat when he did manage to get in behind. And then the goal, the set piece goal, it's a real mess again. From that Hibs point of view, obviously Nick Montgomery asked about it in the post match. He's not going to. You're not going to catch managers, pointing fingers at individuals. He said it was, a collective. Some might, some maybe. Maybe I'm being a bit too generous to the general professional football manager there. But I think Montgomery, he's never really. I don't think I've ever heard him come out and point fingers at individual players for anything since he's been at Hibs.
And he's right. It was a collective.
It was, and he was right, and it was a collective failure. But I think it is kind of almost unforgivable, isn't it, to haul yourself back into a game where you've not been playing well and then to go and concede a goal like that.
Yeah, and I mean, fair enough if St Johnstone had kind of roared back into the game and it's put Hibs to the sword, and it was just one of those days where you kind of hold your hands up and say, you know what, the other team was better. But Hibs had a barrel load of chances at 1-1, and to give Dimitar Mitov his due, he had some outstanding saves. One from Adam Lafondra that, I mean, just probably one of the best saves I've seen this season at Easter Road.
Cracking save, to be fair.
He denied Mizian on a couple of occasions, and you're sort of looking for one of those to go in. You're looking for maybe one of those to, whether it's to sneak in, take a deflection, especially with the weather, and you just think you take advantage of it. But the manner of losing the second goal. I mean, Tony Gallagher had a lot of time, a lot of space to kind of pick his spot. I've lost count of the number of times we've talked about Hibs losing really poor goals from set pieces this season. Just when we thought it was maybe under control, it's reared its ugly head again. And I have to be honest and say, I imagine there could be tweaks going into next week from a starting 11 point of view. But I'm not confident that Hibs can go there and take 3 points. I'm not. I just don't think. I just think, as you say earlier, Motherwell have that momentum. They've got this, seem to have this team spirit that they've developed, and it's obviously there'll be a big sort of home crowd behind them. And I just think we've seen too often this season that Hibs just can't seem to kind of turn it on in that sort of situation. Not helped by the fact, albeit under a previous manager, they've already gone to Fir Park and lost. That's it's obviously it's a different team, but I just think. I mean, obviously, Nick Montgomery would say there's no easy games, but I think, it's next week is quite a daunting prospect for a team that really needs 3 points to, give themselves a chance finishing in the top six. And, obviously the argument from some fans after today will be, why would you want to be in the top six when, it's essentially 5 games where you might get 5 defeats. But at the same time, surely being the top 6 is a better prospect than having just sort of 5 dead rubbers.
Absolutely.
To finish off the season with. But I think that the biggest thing for me was just, we've seen all too often this season Hibs getting back into a game and then just not really being able to apply that kind of killer touch, that killer instinct. Like, yeah, they're creating chances, and the keeper did make some good saves, but there has to be a plan B. You have to think, what's the alternative? What else can we do?
Mm-hmm.
We've tried that, it didn't work. Can we do something different? And Hibs just didn't have that. And I felt there were too many kind of undercooked performances. I'm not going to point the finger because people watched the game, they saw what they saw, but I just think there were players out there today who you would want to be putting in a big performance in a game like today who just didn't.
Mm-hmm.
And that's alarming. It is concerning. You need them to be ones who are kind of taking the game by the scruff of its neck, and they just didn't. And there were patches where Hibs looked quite good. I mean, Jordan Abita, Chris Cadden throwing in some really good crosses, Mizzy and Lafondra getting in some really good spaces, but there just wasn't enough of that. Yeah. And it wasn't as if St Johnstone were tactically brilliant in shutting Hibs down. And
no,
it's a little bit. I think that the concern has to be why have you only been able to do that, A, for a short period of time, and B, once you're a goal down and chasing the game, or you've equalised and you're chasing the winner. Like, where's that from minute one? Where's that from the word go? And I think that's something we've seen all too often this season from Hibs. Like, you look at the game against Livingston, where they came bursting out the traps, 3-0 up after 25 minutes, whatever it was, and you think, well, where was that?
Mm-hmm.
Like, why is there not more of that? And what was different about that game that hasn't been put in, for example, in this game?
Yeah,
it's just so many kind of unanswered questions, and I don't know where you go from here. I think there obviously needs to be a fast start next week, but I think that's easier said than done.
Especially away from home.
Exactly. Yeah. And you know what? Maybe they'll surprise us, because this Hibs team has, it's maybe been surprising on a few occasions this season. Sometimes not for the best, but I just think it's that inconsistency sort of coming back to haunt them again. And you don't really know what way next week's going to go until you know what kind of Hibs team's going to turn up, and you won't know what kind of team's going to turn up until either the start of the game or the first minute of the second half, and that's pretty wild.
Yeah, I think I do share your pessimism almost that Hibs are going to
so realism.
Yeah, unfortunately so. They're going to drag themselves into the top six at this point. It's obviously, when you get to the stage that you're relying on other teams elsewhere to get you to where you want to be, that really tells its own story. Based on that performance today, if it's anything like that, I can't see them taking anything from Motherwell next week, who, as I've touched on, they'll feel $1 million after that result for them today, being 2-0 down with 10 minutes to go. They'll feel that they can go and, it's not out of the question that they can sneak into the top six depending on results. So they'll
also not out of the question that next weekend's game might be of zero meaning, because Dundee might have won
exactly.
In the week. So,
we don't know. It's hard to be too certain with Dundee at the moment.
It's hard to be too certain with Hibs as well. But.
You may have seen one or two things about the headline or two about the Dens Park pitch at the moment, so we don't. You can't make any guarantees. I don't think that Dundee will have that game played in midweek, so there can all sorts of permutations flying around. But I think just to keep it strictly Hibs, it's potentially a really kind of disappointing and flat end to the season, because if, as you said there, and I think we've said a couple of times, if it ends up bottom six, Hibs should be far clear enough of the teams at the very bottom that they don't get dragged into any of that nonsense. And so then it kind of your season just peters out into nothing really, and there's nothing quite that diminishes fans' enthusiasm than games that don't particularly matter. And just kind of have to touch on maybe just finally, there was kind of some real anger at full time today, I think. And I think justifiably so, to be honest, the reaction, because I think with a game today that had that much riding on it, as we've said, and to get such a flat performance, I think, and Nick Montgomery said that himself. He said, I completely understand that reaction, because it was we needed to be better in both boxes, and his message was, we need to kind of try and stay positive, do their own job, and hope that results elsewhere go in a favour. But it's, he's trying to be as positive as possible, but I think there was a sense of realism about the manager as well, I thought, in terms of how things are going to pan out. But it was the anger at full time was quite obvious, and to be honest, you can understand it, I think.
Yeah, it was palpable, and I think we saw people kind of waiting behind to specifically jeer the players and the coaching staff when they came over to do their customary kind of clapping of the fans, which I think it's something they've done after every game. They're not suddenly going to stop it, but there was that. You also had a couple of fans shouting their anger at Ben Kinsella afterwards, as they were making their way out the main stand just in front of us. Don't need to tell you what they were shouting, but I'm sure you can probably guess. And I think when it goes like that, it turns a bit ugly like that, and then I think it becomes, it's not a great atmosphere. I think Nick Montgomery looked a bit scunnered afterwards, to be honest, and I think when he was saying St Johnstone basically had 2 chances, 2 goals, he's got a point, and obviously times like this, results like this, performances like this, fingers are pointed at the manager, but at the same time, you look at the players who were on that pitch today and the performances they've put in, and you sort of think, you've got the quality to put in good performances. So what's happened? So it's either, I don't know what you attribute it to, but it's you've got decent players out there, and for whatever reason it just didn't work. Obviously, you're going to have bad performances. That happens, but I think just to go from a run of pretty good performances, obviously culminating in defeat last weekend, but there was still, I think, positives.
Mm-hmm.
Even today, like if we got the equaliser, it was out of nothing. I think. I mean, it was a great run by Nathan Mariah Welsh, really good pass to Mizian, good save from his effort, but Chris Cadden doing really well to kind of follow up and and slot it into the net for the equaliser. And then I don't know whether it was a kind of, I think you mentioned it earlier, a kind of desperation or a kind of panic almost that this is a game we need to win, and we're sort of we're throwing everything at the opposition goal and nothing's coming off. And I just wonder whether that's maybe it. It's almost like a kind of stage fright. It's a big game. It's one that the players needed to win, and they're just not be able to do it. And I don't know, like I say, whether that's mentality, whether it's something else. I just don't know. But it was just a flat day all round. I think even 11 for the equaliser and that sort of brief period after that when Hibs were on top and were kind of flinging crosses into the box. And as mentioned, Mitov with a handful of good saves. But I think there was almost a kind of sense that they weren't going to get anything from it. And I think when you can sense that, it's that's a concern.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that they've got to try and get out of their systems before next week. And even if it is a game with little riding on it because of what happens in midweek, then I still think there needs to be a performance. There still needs to be a kind of reaction to this because it wasn't as bad as the St Mirren game in February. That was probably the nadir for for Hibs this season, but there was still a lot of kind of poor performances, below par, flat, no real sense of urgency, especially towards the end where you thought St Johnstone are kind of hanging on a bit here.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just, well, yeah, I said Nick Montgomery looked scunnered, and I think that's probably the best word, to be honest. It's just kind of scunnered because I think you look at how Hibs were playing, bar the Rangers game leading up into this game, they've been playing well. It was across the park as well. There've been some good performances in defence. The midfield was working really well. And, in attack, you had Eli Yuan, you had, Mizian doing really well. And, that none of that happened today. Like, defensively, they were poor. In midfield, they were poor. And in attack, so much firepower. And, just, not for the want of trying to a certain extent, but I think you're still expecting more from, a forward line that has, a Premier League player in it. And then in Emiliano Marcondes, Martin Boyle back in the starting lineup. Mizian, Eli Yuan coming on as well, and to not get anything out of the game when you've got them on the pitch for large parts of the game it's a concern, and it's disappointing. And several other similar words we could use.
Yeah, I think that about sums it up. A bad day for Hibs all round. Still salvageable potentially over the next week, but we'll have to wait and see. All that, of course, as we say, that depends on results elsewhere. But for now, I think enough's enough.
Yes.
We will be back on Monday for a sort of more comprehensive look at the game itself. The different elements of it, where it went wrong for Hibs, the goals conceded, what they could perhaps have done differently, individual performances. So do tune in for that on Monday. But as I said, we're going to leave it there for just now. So yeah, thanks as always for joining us. If you want to get into any of the post-match reaction, and obviously we'll have further breakdowns of the game and content into next week, you can take up our subscription offer. It's rolling across the bottom of the screen there. It's currently £4 for 4 months, and that gets you access to absolutely everything that we do, and we do really appreciate it. But yeah, I'm going to shut up now and let try and draw a line under this game today, because it was a bad one for Hibs. But thank you as always for joining us, and we'll see you again next time.
Thank you.